Captain America is many things to many people, and also many people to many or some things. While Steve Rogers is the man most closely associated with the title, there have been many people to assume the position of America's captain, and I thought it'd be interesting to look at some of them. How many? As many as I get to until I get bored. But assume you won't be bored and leave a like. It helps, probably. So, obviously, let's start with Steve Rogers, the first and longest running Captain America, for almost 80 years now. Rogers was initially intended as a stand-in for the country itself and the influence it would have on the world stage. Over the decades, though, he has evolved into a more idealistic version of the United States, more so a person to aspire to, as opposed to a reflection of who we are currently, which is, not great. Enough about Steve Rogers, though. Everyone knows this. I'm just padding for time while Wikipedia loads. Did you know, though, that after Steve Rogers was presumed dead near the end of World War II, the government didn't wait for him to come back to assign a new Captain of America? And by didn't wait, I mean they just assumed he was dead, because statistically speaking, yeah, obviously you'd assume he's dead. This, however, resulted in the Captain America of the 1950s, William Burnside. A big fan of the original, Burnside did extensive research on Cap, and eventually found a different version of the super soldier serum that gave the first his powers. He went to the FBI with this information, hoping to be made the new Captain America for the Korean War. While they were initially presumably jazzed at the idea, they eventually decided it would be a bad look to introduce a nationalist symbol in the current political climate. Interesting that is what sparked some red flags, and not the fact that at this point William Burnside had legally changed his name to Steve Rogers and undergone surgeries to more closely resemble the lost hero. That, to me, seems like a big old bag of yikes, but hey, I guess it was the 50s, so everything was horrifying in retrospect. Anyway, eventually an emergency arises and Burnside seizes his chance. He suckers in one of his students, again, big yikes. The duo take the serum and become the Cap and Bucky of the 1950s. It's great! Until the faulty serum causes them to have psychotic episodes, they're thrown into suspended animation, as all super soldiers seem to be, and when he comes back, Burnside joins a white nationalist terrorist organization, calling himself the Grand Director. So fun times for a character that was created only to explain the continuity error of how Captain America appeared in the comics in the 1950s when he was supposed to have disappeared in 1945. Could have just said a wizard did it. Let's move on, though, from an imbalanced white man who took over the mantle from Steve Rogers to an imbalanced white man who took over the mantle from Steve Rogers. John Walker started his superhero career as Super Patriot, a corporate-sponsored performer who would travel the country and put on shows while liberally taking jabs at Captain America for being an outdated symbol. This causes a bit of a sticking point when soon after Steve Rogers steps down from the mantle due to the government trying to have more control of the Captain America identity. This leads to Walker eventually leaving the Super Patriot identity and becoming the new Cap, along with his fellow performer Lamar Hoskins as the new Bucky, who was later renamed Battlestar. Walker is much more willing to comply with the demands of the government organization and also proves to be a more brutal and reactionary captain than Steve Rogers. Much like Burnside before him, Walker proves to be too unstable to remain as Cap, hitting his lowest point when he murders many terrorists as revenge for them killing his parents. Unlike Burnside, however, Walker is given a second chance after giving up the mantle. After being placed in witness protection and undergoing therapy, Walker eventually returns to the superhero game as U.S. Agent, using the vibranium shield Rogers used while he was the countryless captain. As U.S. Agent, Walker would later go on to join the West Coast Avengers. So, I know that's not super cool, but it probably meant a lot to him, so if we could all just pretend for his sake, please? Leave a like if you're pretending. I saw you think about leaving one earlier, just do it! What have you got to lose? James Buchanan Barnes, Cap's best friend and man with a name so boring that it deceives you into thinking it's cool. If you're watching this, you probably already know his deal. He was Steve Rogers' sidekick during World War II and disappeared in the same incident as he did. Unlike his mentor, he was uncovered soon after by the Soviet Union and was brainwashed, trained, and kept in cryostasis, only being released to perform espionage missions as the Winter Soldier throughout the rest of the 20th century and into the modern day. After crossing paths with his old friend, he is brought back and rehabilitated, still haunted by his former demons, but at least not having to be frozen and refrozen like a lasagna you could never bring yourself to cook. After the 2006 event Civil War, Steve Rogers was killed in the not very spoiler-conscious story, The Death of Captain America. Being post-Civil War and the government being more hands-on in superhero activity, Bucky was naturally concerned about what would happen to his friend's legacy, so he steals back the shield and eventually gets the blessing to continue on as the new Cap. As Captain America, Bucky would adopt an adamantium-laced suit to make up for his lack of a super soldier serum. He would also wield a gun and knife, weapons he was trained extensively with in his days as the Winter Soldier. But of course, as these things tend to go, Steve Rogers was not actually dead. I know, shock of all shocks. What was surprising, though, is that even after he returned, Bucky was allowed to remain Captain America, with Steve taking a costumeless role in the superhero community. It wasn't until later on, during the Fear Itself storyline, that Captain America was seemingly killed in action, forcing Steve to take up the mantle once again and effectively ending Bucky's tenure in the role. Interesting side note, Bucky didn't die in the attack. He was only mostly dead, and was given something called the Infinity Formula, which gave him enhanced durability and an elongated lifespan. While it wasn't as potent as the original, it is kinda cool that he did eventually get some super soldier enhancement, even if it was after he gave up being the Star-Spangled Man. And the most recent person to take up the Stars and Stripes pajamas in the main Marvel continuity has been Sam Wilson, better known as the Falcon and frequent partner of Steve Rogers in the modern day. When Steve Rogers' age caught up to him, quite literally, and he was no longer physically able to be Captain America, the shield was passed on to Sam. Wilson's tenure as Cap was, to put it mildly, tumultuous, as one might expect for a minority, particularly a black man, who was taking up a position previously only held by white men. Sam also wanted to set himself apart by severing ties to the government and developing an app where people could ask for help personally, as a way to keep Captain America close to the community and more involved in social issues. He also turns into a wolf. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Things became even more complicated when Steve Rogers was restored to his prime by the Cosmic Cube and became Captain America again, resulting in both Caps existing simultaneously. Now, with both of these choices, which do we think the American people preferred? Here's a hint, not the black guy. What makes this worse is that this Steve Rogers was actually an evil fabrication who used the original's reputation and influence to take over the country. Sam, along with whoever else he could scrape together, eventually put an end to this plot and restored the original Steve. Feeling that he had now proved himself as Cap, Sam returns the mantle to Steve so that the latter could work on restoring his tarnished reputation. And that's everyone in the main Marvel continuity who has become Captain America. But hey, let's spin our wheels a little longer and talk about other Captain Americas from around the multiverse. Spider-Man 2099 exists in a potential alternate future of the Marvel Universe. In this continuity, Captain America is a woman named Roberta Mendez, the wife of a scientist working for the company Alchemax, who forced her into taking the super soldier serum they were developing. Interestingly, this caused her to form a split personality, with Captain America being a separate identity and Roberta being oblivious to her double life, which is pretty impressive. I imagine it's difficult to be both Superman and Lois Lane. Peggy Carter, although previously a fairly consistent if often overlooked part of Steve Rogers' story, has exploded in popularity in the last decade. This was due to her portrayal in the movies by Haley Atwell and... well, actually, that's it. But have you seen Haley Atwell perform? The woman could make the plague seem appealing. Anyway, she's gone from obscure to well-recognized in the public eye. So, even from just a purely marketing standpoint, it makes way too much sense to introduce a version where she became Captain America. In her universe, Steve Rogers died before the transformation, and she volunteered in his stead. She later went on to join the multiversal superhero team, the Exiles. Bizarrely enough, the idea for her becoming Captain America actually comes from the mobile game Marvel Puzzle Quest, where she was released as a skin to celebrate Cap's 75th anniversary. How's that for an origin story? Regardless, I love her. And before I wrap this up, honorable mention to Isaiah Bradley, an African-American soldier who had a version of the super soldier serum tested on him. He stole one of Cap's uniforms to complete missions in Europe during World War II, and despite his heroic actions, he was reprimanded and imprisoned for several years. While he never truly held the mantle, he definitely embodied the spirit and selflessness of Captain America, and I think that deserves a shout-out. And on that cheerful note, that's it for now. Clearly I didn't get to all the different versions, but let me know in the comments if any of these are your favorite, or if I didn't get to yours. Is your favorite Steve Rogers? Are you basic? That's fine, no shame in that. And if you like this video, consider subscribing for more, or go look around at one of my other videos, or just go do something else entirely. All those choices are valid, and I appreciate you. As always, I've been the Watcher of New Earth. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.